A show of strengthening ties. Singapore Prime Minister Hsien met Chinese President Xi Jinping today in the Great Hall of the People. It's among a series of sit-downs with various Chinese leaders lined up in Beijing. Mr. Li is on the final leg of his 6-day trip to China. And for more, CNA's Olivia Hsien joins us live. She's in Beijing. Olivia, what did both sides have to say about the Singapore-China ties?
Well, that's right, Dawn. Singapore Prime Minister Loong meeting the Chinese President Xi Jinping just a short while ago. Both leaders hailing the good ties between the two countries and also, importantly, talking about cooperation moving forward following the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this trip is significant for several reasons. This is the first time that the Singapore Prime Minister is visiting China since the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Also, after China lifted its strict COVID-19 prevention measures at the end of last year. Now, during their sit-down, Mr. Li told the Chinese president that he's particularly glad that he has seen that life in the country is returning to normal. But he did add that the last few years of the pandemic have been difficult for everyone. But he said that because of Singapore and China's deep understanding and strong friendship that has been built up over the years, that both sides have seen their bilateral relationship grow closer together. However, he said that this is a good time to look ahead and work together and take the partnership forward. Now, also timely as this visit is taking place just shortly after China completed a 5-yearly reshuffle of its top leadership. Also, the first time that the two leaders are meeting since Mr. Xi secured that unprecedented third term as China's president at the recently concluded annual parliamentary meetings held here in Beijing. Now, this is what Mr. Li had to say about cooperation moving forward.
China has a new leadership team in place. It's laid out its vision and long-term goals for the next stage of development. And I'm happy to read of China's emphasis on economic growth and resilience. I'm confident that the economy will continue to strengthen. Many countries, including Singapore, are very keen to enhance our economic ties with China, and I hope that my visit will inject fresh momentum for bilateral cooperation and high-level exchanges between us.
Now, Mr. Li's visit also comes as China has been keen to reboot its economy, taking steps and making efforts to give the economy a jumpstart as it has suffered during the last few years of the pandemic. And Mr. Xi, in his remarks to the Singapore Prime Minister, said that China's development will be an anchor and growth engine for global world economic recovery, adding that it will work with countries that cooperate with China to seize these opportunities. President Xi also saying that China always regards Singapore as a priority in its foreign relations. Now, the last time the two leaders met was not too long ago in November last year on the sidelines of that APEC summit in Bangkok. Mr. Xi, however, also noting that the Singapore Prime Minister was one of the foreign leaders that has visited China the most number of times, also being among the first batch to visit the country following that leadership reshuffle. Dawn?
Ollie, Mr. Li also met with other Chinese leaders today. What do we know about what was discussed?
Yes, Don, it's been a full day of meetings for the Singapore Prime Minister, and he sat down with people, Chinese leaders, who some were the first time he was meeting, others he were more familiar and others who have been familiar faces but have taken up new posts since they last met. In particular, Mr. Li met with Zhao Leji, who is the new chairman of the National People's Congress, which is China's legislature. During their sit-down, Mr. Li said bilateral ties between Singapore and China have strengthened in the last few years, with bilateral cooperation projects thriving as well. The Prime Minister also said that during the recent Communist Party Congress held in October last year and those parliamentary meetings earlier this month, that China has set out new policies and a direction for its future. And given the strong bilateral ties between the two countries, this sets the foundation for future cooperation. Now, Mr. Li also is among the first batch to visit China following that leadership reshuffle. Mr. Zhao saying that, this also shows the importance that Singapore has placed on its bilateral relationship with China. Mr. Zhao being appointed as the head of the legislature during those parliamentary meetings. But the two leaders are not unfamiliar with each other. They last met back in 2017 in Singapore when Mr. Zhao was attending the Singapore-China Leadership Forum. Another familiar face that PM Li met was Wang Huning, who has been now newly appointed as the head of China's top political advisory body. Mr. Li also saying that, mentioning how their relationship has even gone back to 1993. Then Mr. Li was Deputy Prime Minister, and when Mr. Wang had led a university delegation for a debate competition in Singapore. And Mr. Li said that, Singapore has worked with many generations of Chinese leaders, and Singapore's leadership, both old and new, are ready to work with the Chinese leaders to continue to strengthen bilateral relations. Dawn?
Olivia, thank you for that. Olivia Hsien there, reporting for us in Beijing.